Hello, everyone. Since the topic came up on my forum, I thought I'd clarify my position on the Mage-Templar conflict a little more. Bear in mind, this rant will contain spoilers for both the game and the novel asunder. A lot of people have taken for granted that in a fantasy setting there will be mages, and elves and dwarves and dragons, etc. Sometimes they're revered, like Gandalf and Saruman in The Lord of the Rings. Sometimes they're reviled. For example, in a lot of the Dragonlance novels, mages don't tend to fare too well in popularity for most of the timeline. And sometimes the world simply accepts that they exist and treat it like any other specialization, such as in Dungeons and Dragons. Magic is just connected with fantasy, and people who wield it have always been feared because of what they can call to their fingertips. In many stories, there are ways to counterbalance this, such as they get exhausted more quickly, they're more frail physically, they have to study for hours and hours, they forget spells, they need spell components, and so on. In Dragon Age, though, the mages are limited by the Templars. That's their foil in that world. Like any great, nigh limitless power, having it tempered is a relief to anyone who can't combat the effects of magic otherwise. The Templars do serve an essential function, and without them a great many more people would end up hurt, killed, or destroyed. Heck, entire continents would be gone. If the chantry is to be believed, it's because of mages that the greatest threat to all of Thedas exists. The Darkspawn. I believe that at their base, the Templars are necessary and serve an important protective function. What they've evolved into over time, and especially with where the Chantry has gone since its inception, is an entirely different story. The fact that the Chantry has so much control over almost all of Thedas that they can override the rule of a country if it suits their purpose is worrisome. That much power in the hands of people who command the strongest religious force in the continent is frightening. Given the importance of religion in many people's lives, especially in a world where there are dragons, darkspawn, wyverns, demons, undead, and monsters of all sorts, having the political power over the political power that the Chantry does is actually dangerous. Who is going to go against the word of God, or in this case the Maker, when they say that someone or something is evil and must be exterminated? The Tevinter Imperium is the largest example of a country that, to this day, continues to oppose the Chantry as it exists in the rest of Thedas. And what's the reputation there? Why, they're reviled. Some of it is apparently deserved, as they still have slavery and blood magic running rampant, but everyone talks about them as though Tevinter is the center of all sin on Thedas, blamed for the blights, blamed for the continued absence of the Maker, and so on. Please note, I am not justifying what the Tevinter Imperium does. With their slavery and their blood magic, they can fuck right off. But a lot of people point to the rampant use of magic as the reason for why they're all so corrupt, instead of, say, the culture itself being where the problem lies. Nope. According to the Chantry and most of Thedas, Tevinter is evil and corrupt because they don't condemn magic. I find it very interesting that the most common thing we hear from the Chant of Light is about how mages are supposed to serve man, not rule over him. Right from the start, we're led into the concept that the Chantry doesn't like magic, and controls the only force capable of combating mages, the Templars. In fact, the Chantry controls the lyrium trade, and smuggling it out from Dwarven territory is a crime. So Templars, who are only capable of being Templars while consuming lyrium on a regular enough basis, have to follow the Chantry's orders or risk not only being cut off from what empowers their abilities, but something they're forcibly made addicted to by the Chantry. Word of God, David Gator, says, in fact, that any Templar that stops taking lyrium will lose their powers. So, presumably, Alistair has lost his skills as a Templar, unless he's been gulping lyrium in secret, over time. So, Templars need to stay loyal to the Chantry in order to be useful against mages. Supposedly. The Circle was originally started as a means for mages to gather peacefully and study their magic without being rounded up and summarily executed, especially in a hostile period so soon after the fall of the Imperium and the rise of Andraste as a holy figure. The Templars were appointed to keep watch over these circles, to keep them from falling to corruption. So the basic idea at one time was actually not that bad. It allowed mages a certain amount of freedom and protection from those who feared them. Unfortunately, over time, both the Chantry and the Templars became increasingly hateful of mages, taking away bits and pieces of their rights and wielding the ultimate form of control, the right of tranquility, to keep the mages from becoming possessed or too rebellious. We learn in Asunder that this isn't actually a solution at all, that mages can be brought back from being made tranquil and can even still be possessed by demons, that, mostly, they're not noticed by demons because demons thrive off of the moral world's emotions and want to experience it through them. But a tranquil is not immune to possession. The result of the erosion of rights and freedoms of mages is an environment where people are rounded up and put in a prison for a circumstance of their birth, told from day one how worthless and evil they are, and monitored and scrutinized so closely in every aspect of their lives that the idea of privacy has already been forfeited. As Anders says, mages don't fall in love because they know it only gives the Templars an edge over them, something that can be used to control them. As Wynne shows, if you're a mage and you have a baby, the baby is immediately taken from you. They aren't allowed to study basic self-defense because mages are presumed to have a weapon already. They're magic. And that teaching them how to use a dagger to protect themselves is discouraged. Mages in the circle are taught that they are not valued, that they deserve to be stripped of freedom because they're too powerful to control otherwise. They're taught to loathe themselves, as the one mage in the tower demonstrates clearly, the one ranting about the Templars being like the sword of mercy that killed Andraste and how the mages deserve to be wiped out. Let me tell you something about any group that's taught to loathe itself, to undervalue itself, to see themselves as abominations in the culture that they grow up in. Maybe for a time they tuck their heads under their wings, pretend it's night, and sleep away the pain they're forced to accept. But eventually, people are going to get mad. When they get mad, they demand their freedoms returned to them. They will fight, and since they have nothing to lose, they'll fight as savagely as it takes to win. At that point, the conflict either becomes a revolution or a genocide. I stand with the mages in this conflict. Mages are not inherently evil. You can play as a mage in both games without resorting to blood magic. The option is available, but in neither game is there a sign of the protagonist becoming possessed by a demon, and there are many good mages, and morally grey mages, that are often misguided or react to the abuse hurled their way. Like any other person, a mage can be good or bad. It's not magic that turns someone evil, just like using a sword doesn't make someone a murderer. It's what the person chooses to do with it. The problem comes in that because a mage has a lot more power at their disposal, the danger of them turning evil is a lot higher. But the Circle is not a solution to that, nor are the Templars the way that they're organized now. Again, the Word of God, aka Gator, said that the overuse of blood mages in DA2 was not part of the plan, that having so many was actually going too far. They tried to include extreme examples of mages to try and counteract the clear evil that the Templars were doing in the Circle, and as a result they attempted balancing, ended up skewing things in the Templars' favor in the eyes of many fans. That they wanted to side with the mages, but after encountering so many evil blood mages, maybe there's something to what Meredith believes. But Gator says that for as many blood mages we stumble across, there are many more good, decent, quiet, law-abiding mages that we don't see. And I'm sorry, but no. I love Cullen, I love Thrask, I love Karen and Emmerich, and Evangeline and Asunder, and there are obviously some good Templars that are subject to corruption from the top down that still mean well, but I cannot condone what the Templars do. They isolate the mages, treat them like criminals, condemn them for crimes they've never even committed, and lock them away or execute them. They beat them and hurt them and invade their lives. They, in their position of authority over mages, rape them and use the right of tranquility to remove their free will and resistance to abuse. We hear nothing of Meredith or any of the other Templars trying to put a stop to it, outside of Thrask and Karen. Even Cullen mutters angrily, though speaking from trauma, "Mages aren't people like you or me." Which is the heart of the problem. The Templars stopped seeing mages as people. Anders has watched this for his entire life. He's been at the heart of it. He tries to avoid it, to run from it, to free himself and never look back, but in time he couldn't. When he turned to face what was going on in the circle, in every circle, he was too appalled at the injustice to turn his back on it again. When he joined with Justice, however stupid a move it was, no matter how well intentioned, he was changed forever and placed inexorably on the path that leads to his actions at the end of Act 3. On a tangent, Anders, as he is in DA2, is not the same Anders from Awakening. He is the mix of both Anders and Justice. He can't separate the two in his mind. Their memories have mixed together, their spirits completely merged. He says as much right from the start, yet people believe that when he gets all glowy and weird-voiced, that's Justice, and the rest of the time he's Anders. I really don't think so. Anders in DA2 is an entity that has taken the name Anders because it's the strongest anchor he has anymore, so his actions over the game are that of a man literally possessed by his cause. Justice. Back on topic. Anders goes through 6 years of watching his pleas go unanswered, watching his own people suffering and dying, being killed or made tranquil, all because of how they were born. He sees the labeling from the Chantry and the nigh-absolute power given to Templars over the Mages. He sees not just hatred, but largely indifference, which is what enables the slow genocide of the Mages right under everyone's noses. Never mind that when we meet him, he watches a man he knew intimately, and romantically at one time, be turned into a husk of himself, one that turns on Anders at the behest of the Templars. He is forced to kill his old friend and lover to spare him living as a tranquil. So he starts off with a pretty seriously traumatic kick to the gut that ties into his cause. 6 years of being ignored. Of the increasing pressure on the Mages, of living under the threat of being executed, or worse, of trying to help his people only to see things get worse for them beyond his ability to control or aid. 6 years of even the people closest to him shrugging, rolling their eyes, treating him like the resident wacko. Of course he gets desperate. And he does something unconscionable. He kills innocent people in blowing up the Chantry. He plunges the world into war, forcing the Mages to either be slaughtered or to fight back. He eats his own heart over it, as you can hear as he does it. He's even willing to be killed as punishment, especially by Hawk, because he knows how wrong what he did was. But he felt he had no choice. I agree with him that he didn't. The Chantry itself symbolizes the very worst sort of politically empowered religious institution. It's the kind with absolute power, the kind that can decide that something is evil and stir the masses to march on their behalf, to crusade against anyone the Chantry labels as an enemy of the Maker. Althena's claim to have no control or power is absolutely of bullshit. She could have stepped in at any time to tell Meredith to knock that shit off, but she didn't. Or she could have stepped in and said that she agreed with Meredith and her methods, just to make it clear where her allegiance stood. Instead, she played the political game of pretending not to be involved while people were being abused, raped, killed, and turned tranquil. She didn't want to lose status in the eyes of the people, and instead walked a careful balancing act of supporting neither side publicly, just to avoid condemnation on either side of the conflict. She was even warned to get out of Kirkwall, that she could have become a target of the discontent. What was her reaction? To claim that she can't abandon her flock, and besides, who would attack the Grand Cleric? So certain was she that no harm would come to her, she staked not only her life, but the lives of everyone in her flock on the idea that the Chantry is infallible and untouchable. I have my own theory that she even deliberately stayed in the Chantry even as the conflict escalated to be a martyr for the Chantry, or at least the anti-mage crowd. With all the backstabbing and intrigue that goes on in the religion, I wouldn't be surprised. So Anders chooses the target that will remove the chance of compromise, the target of political power and influence, the main institution that claims that mages and magic are evil. He targets the building that cannot be ignored. He makes it loud and clear that there will be no more dithering over what to do in the conflict while people are being abused and killed. He knows how much danger this puts mages in, but as he points out to Orsino, we were already doomed. A quick death now or a slow one later. At least now they have a fighting chance. He does a vile, disgusting thing, and he even admits that he knows the conflict won't end there, that there will be war and a lot of fighting long before this ends. If Asunder is any indication, he was right. There were already signs that the Templars, and the Seekers, or at least a faction of them, were corrupt and impatient with the Chantry. Especially now that they have a new divine, one that apparently sympathizes with the mages. There have been conspiracies to try and make mages look even worse, to escalate the tension and justify what the Templars do, as is shown right at the beginning of Asunder. And they really were just waiting for the perfect excuse to slam the prison bars around the mages. Unfortunately, it seems to be backfiring, especially since Anders showed that the Chantry can be challenged and defeated. I side with the mages. It's time for revolution. It's time for change. And I suspect that we haven't seen the whole story either, with the mages, or the Darkspawn, or the Chantry. In fact, everything seems linked together. The Fade, Lyrium, Darkspawn, Magic, the Maker, Andraste, all connected with music and dragons. But that's its own rant. Thanks for listening, everyone.